you ever looked at someone with the same exact clearance, the same job title, and maybe even about the same amount of experience and wondered, how in the world are they making so much more than I am right now? And you know what's interesting to me? After 17 years of recruiting in the cleared space, I can tell you that question comes up all the time. And most people think that they already know the answer. They'll assume something like, well, they probably have a better personality, or maybe they've just been doing it longer. And sometimes that can be true, but a lot of the times it isn't. You know, I've seen software engineers with fewer years of experience making more than someone who's been doing it twice as long. And I've seen systems engineers with the exact same clearance making completely different salaries. So the question is, what is going on? That's what I want to help you understand today, because I think a lot of cleared professionals know what they make, but they don't actually know what they're worth in today's market. And those are two very different things. Welcome back to Beyond the Badge. You know, one of the questions I get asked more than just about anything is this: Tony, what should I be making? And every time that somebody asks me that, I pretty much give them the same answer. I don't know yet. Now, some people probably think that I'm trying to avoid the question, and the reality is I'm really not, okay? I think about it for a second. How could I possibly tell what you're worth if I don't know what you've actually done? I don't know what programs that you've supported. I don't know what technologies that you've worked with. I don't know how relevant your experience is to the role that you were looking at. I don't even know if you've spent the last 5 years building cloud infrastructure or maintaining legacy systems, for example. And all of that matters. You see, I think this is where a lot of people accidentally oversimplify compensation in the cleared market. We want one easy answer, don't we? What's a TSSCI with a full scope poly worth? Or what's the average salary for a systems engineer? Now, those aren't bad questions, okay? I completely understand why people would even ask them to begin with, but they're just incomplete in my opinion. Because here's what I've learned after 17 years of recruiting. I've talked to 2 systems engineers, same exact clearance, same customer, very similar resumes, about the same years of experience, and they were making completely different salaries. Now, think about that for a second. How in the world is that possible? Shouldn't they be making about the same? You and I both know that's not necessarily true, because the market isn't paying for a title. Sure, the title itself is tied to pay bands, etc., but the reality is that it's paying for the value someone brings to a specific mission. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I have 2 software engineers, okay? One has spent the last 6 years writing C++ for mission systems supporting a customer in Maryland, and the other has 6 years of software experience too, but most of it's been development outside of the Intel community. Now, are they both software engineers? For sure, right? You and I would both agree with that. But are they going to be evaluated the same way for every opportunity? Probably not. Do you see what I mean? Titles will get you in the conversation, but the relevant experience moves that conversation forward. And there are so many other things that really influence compensation. Like, what customer have you been supporting? What technologies are you known for? How difficult would it be to replace someone with your background? Where's the work located? What labor category does this role fall under? I mean, even timing plays a role, right? I've seen candidates receive different offers for nearly identical work simply because one program had more flexibility than the other. And that surprises people, but it's real. So when someone asks me, Tony, what should I be making? The first thing that goes through my mind isn't a number. It's a list of questions, because before we ever talk about compensation, I need to understand you. Now, I want to say something here because I don't want this episode to be misunderstood in any way, shape, or form, okay? There are some outstanding resources that help us understand the market. One of the best, in my opinion, is the annual Clearance Jobs Compensation Report. I read it every year, recruiters read it, hiring managers read it, and I think every cleared professional should read it too. But here's where I think people sometimes get tripped up, okay? The report itself is a benchmark. It's not a personalized salary calculator, okay? If you think about it like this, okay? If I told you that the average home price in Maryland, what it was, would that tell you exactly what your neighbor's house is worth? Of course not. You'd want to know where it's located, how big it is, how old it is, what condition it's in. And your career works exactly the same way. Your clearance matters. Absolutely. We've established that many, many times over. And your technical skills matter. Your relevant experience matters. The customer matters. The location matters. The contract matters. They all work together. Okay. So instead of asking, what's a TSSCI with a full scope poly worth? I want you to start asking a different question. What's the market willing to pay for someone with my background? And that's a completely different conversation, in my opinion. And honestly, I think it's the conversation I wish more cleared professionals were having, because once you stop comparing yourself to one person and start understanding where you fit in the market, I think everything changes. And you're no longer guessing. You're making informed career decisions. And that's exactly where I want to start this conversation. So, if your clearance isn't the whole story, what are recruiters actually looking at? I get this question too, okay? People will say, okay, Tony, then what determines what I'm worth? I'm glad you asked, because I can tell you exactly where my mind goes when I'm talking to a candidate, okay? It doesn't matter if I'm recruiting a software engineer, a systems engineer, a cyber professional, or even a systems administrator, okay? I'm running through the same checklist in my head every single time. And the very first thing that I'm looking at, it's not your years of experience. It's your relevant experience. There's a huge difference, in my opinion, okay? So if you think about it for a second, if you've been in the industry for 20 years, but you've only spent the last 2 working in an area this customer actually cares about, should they value all 20 years at the same? Unfortunately, probably not, okay? Now, does that mean those other 18 years don't matter? Of course not, right? They helped shape who you are as an engineer or technical professional today. But when a hiring manager is trying to solve a very specific problem, they're looking for experience that's directly connected to that problem, okay? I've talked to candidates with 20 years of experience who were frustrated. You're probably on here watching this right now with that many years of experience, and you're frustrated too. And they were being considered for what they felt was a mid-level role. Then I've talked to someone with 8 years of highly specialized experience who was commanding a much, much higher salary. Does that seem backwards? At first, yeah, right? But once you understand how customers evaluate experience, it starts to make a lot more sense. Now, let me ask you something. When someone introduces themselves, what do they usually say? I'm a systems engineer, I'm a software engineer, I'm in cyber, and that's a great starting point, but it's not enough, because my next question is always, okay, tell me more. What kind of software? What customer? What technologies? What problems have you actually been solving? Because 2 software engineers can have completely different careers. One might have spent years developing embedded software. Another has been building cloud-native applications in AWS. Another has been writing CNO tools. Same title, but very different backgrounds, right? And the market knows the difference for sure, right? That's why I always tell people the market doesn't reward job titles. It rewards expertise. Now, here's another one that surprises people. Location. Have you ever noticed that the same role can pay differently depending on where it's located? There's a reason for that, right? Different markets have different levels of competition, different labor rates, different customer demands. Supporting a mission in Maryland isn't always going to look the same as supporting one somewhere else. Then you've got the customer. Some customers need very niche experience that's difficult to replace. Others have a much larger talent pool to choose from. And that affects its compensation itself. Then there's the contract itself. And I don't think enough candidates really realize this, okay? Because not every contract is priced the same. Not every labor category has the same budget. Sometimes a company would love to pay you more, but they're working within the labor category that was priced when the contract was awarded. Does that mean another company couldn't pay you more? Absolutely. Could another program value your background differently? Absolutely. That's why comparing one offer to another without understanding the context can be very misleading, in my opinion. Now, I want to pause here for a second because I don't know. I think this is important. Okay. I think everything that I've talked about so far, none of it is in any way, shape, or form meant to discourage you. So if you've been still with me here at this point, in no way, shape, or form is this meant to discourage you. It's actually quite the opposite. I'm trying to pull back the curtain a little bit, the layer of the onion, if you will. Because once you understand how recruiters and hiring managers evaluate someone, you can start asking much better questions. Instead of asking, what's the average salary for somebody with my clearance? Maybe you ask, how does my background line up with this labor category? Or am I being considered at the right level? Or maybe, is there something missing from my resume that's causing people to evaluate me lower than I should be? Those are great questions, because here's something I've seen more than once. Sometimes someone isn't underpaid. They're just being evaluated at the wrong level. Maybe they've taken on responsibilities that never made it onto their resume. Maybe they've grown into a senior engineer, but their resume still reads like a mid-level one. Or maybe they simply haven't told their story well enough. That's why I think this week's theme is so important. Know your worth and own the conversation. Knowing your worth doesn't mean you're walking into your manager's office demanding another $30,000 because someone on LinkedIn said that they're making more. It means understanding how the market evaluates your background. So you can have a conversation based on facts instead of assumptions, and there's a big difference. So I don't know. Let's make this practical, okay? Because at this point, you might be thinking, okay, Tony, I get it. My salary is more than my clearance. It's more than my job title. So how do I actually figure out where I stand? I'm glad you asked. So because this is something I think every cleared professional should do, I don't think that you should do it every month. I don't even think it's every 6 months, but at least once a year, okay? And here's the interesting part. I don't think that you should do this because you're looking for another job. In fact, I'd rather you do it when you're perfectly happy where you are. Why is that? Because that's when you're thinking clearly. You're not making decisions because you're frustrated. You're not reacting to a layoff. You're not panicking because a contract ended. You're simply gathering information. And trust me when I say this, that is a much better place to make career decisions from. So let me walk you through the 3-step market check that I would recommend to a lot of my clear professionals that I work with, I guess. Step number 1, understand the market, okay? The first thing that I want you to do is get a pulse on what's happening around you. One of my favorite resources, again, like I mentioned earlier, is the Clearance Jobs Compensation Report. I read it every year. It gives you a really good picture of what's happening across the cleared community. I think it's awesome. It's not what Tony thinks, not what your buddy told you over lunch. It's actual market data. They've got a resource of, I think, 2 million people of cleared professionals in their database, and they've got a lot of information and a really, really good market pulse. So I would reference that for sure. Then I want you to spend a little time looking at current job postings. Not because I'm trying to convince you to leave your company. I'm really not here. I want you to look for patterns. Think about it. If you find 20 software engineer positions that all look similar to your background and they're all paying within a similar range, in some states they actually post the range, I think that's telling you something. That's the market speaking itself, okay? And that's valuable information to you. Cool. Step 2 is understanding yourself. Now, I think this is where a lot of people stop, all right? I would encourage you not to, because the market doesn't hire resumes. It hires people. Sure, resumes themselves is what I like to think of as a lead generator, meaning if your resume speaks to the job itself, it initiates a phone call from the recruiter. It gets you in the door, right? But the market doesn't hire resumes, okay? It hires people. So let me ask you something. If I called you today and I said, tell me why I should hire you, what would you say? Seriously, would you tell me your job title? Would you tell me how many years you've worked? Or would you tell me the problems that you've solved? The missions that you've supported, the technologies that you've become known for? Think about that, because I can tell you from experience, The candidates who receive the strongest offers usually aren't the ones with the longest resumes. They're the ones who can clearly explain the value that they bring to the table. To me, that's a really, really big difference. Cool. Step number 3, have a market conversation. Now, here's the step almost nobody does. I think it's because it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and it's just easy to collect that next paycheck a week or two from now. But I would encourage you to do this. Talk to a recruiter. And before you tune me out, trust me, I'm not talking about calling somebody because you're ready to leave your company. I'm talking about building a relationship. Find someone who recruits in your niche, someone who already knows your customer, someone who knows your skill set, who knows your market. For example, for me, I focus on recruiting candidates with a TSSCI with a full scope poly for the Fort Meade agency. That's my specialty right now. I've been doing it for the last 7, 8, 9 years. And just have a conversation with that recruiter. It can be as simple as, hey, I'm not actively looking, but I've been on the same program for a while. I'm just kind of curious where someone with my background fits in today's market. That's it. A good recruiter should be able to give you perspective. Maybe they'll tell you you're right. You're exactly right where you should be. That's fantastic. Maybe they'll tell you that your skill set is just becoming more valuable than you realized. That's good information too. Maybe they'll tell you that there are a couple of other areas that could strengthen, that you could strengthen over the next year or so. That's even better because now you have direction. Now you have direction, right? So anyway, I want to tell you what I don't want you to do, okay? I think I mentioned this on last week's podcast, but I don't want you to compare yourself to one person on LinkedIn. Don't compare yourself to your neighbor, and definitely don't compare yourself to the guy in the comments section who says he's making another $50,000. You don't know this person. You don't know their background. What's the matter? You don't know his customer. You don't know his labor category. You don't know what makes him valuable. Compare yourself to the market, okay? Not one person. There's a big difference here, okay? And here's the part I really hope that you take away from all of this today. The goal of a market check isn't to convince yourself to leave. It's for clarity, okay? I talked about this last week. Maybe you discover that you're exactly where you should be. Great, stay. Maybe you realize that you've quietly outgrown your current role. And that's valuable too, because now you're making a decision based on information, not emotion. And that's huge. And if there's one thing here that I've learned after all of these years is that the best career decisions almost always come from clarity and not urgency. So let's say that you've done the work. You've looked at the market. You've compared opportunities that actually match your background. You've talked with a recruiter. Maybe you've even compared your current role to what's available. Now what? That's really the question, isn't it? What do you actually do with all of that information? Well, I think it starts with taking a deep breath, because here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want you finishing this episode and then immediately thinking, Tony said I should go and ask for more money. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is this. Now you have clarity, and clarity gives you options. Maybe you discover you're exactly where you should be. That's a win. Seriously. You don't have to leave your company just because another one is offering a little bit more money. If you're working for a great leader, you're learning, you're on a stable program, and you're being compensated fairly, you might already be in a fantastic position. Sometimes I think the best career move is staying exactly where you are. Now, let's look at the other side. Maybe your market check tells a different story. Maybe you've quietly outgrown your role. Maybe your responsibilities have changed over the last few years, but your compensation hasn't. Or maybe you've developed a niche skill that's become much more valuable than you accepted when you accepted the job. Now you've got a decision to make. And if it were me, I'd start a conversation. Not a demand, not an ultimatum, just a conversation. Something like, I'd love to sit down and talk about how my role has evolved over the last few years and where that fits in today's market. You see the difference? You're not walking in saying, Company X will pay me another $40,000. You're talking about your value. You're talking about your growth. You're talking about your contribution itself. And that is a much healthier conversation. Now, could your company tell you that they don't have flexibility right now? Absolutely. That doesn't automatically mean that it's time to leave. But it does give you information. And information helps you make better decisions. Can I tell you one mistake that I've seen people make over the years? They chase the biggest paycheck. I have watched candidates leave for another $20,000 only to realize 6 months later that they traded away a great manager. They traded away a stable contract. They traded away a team that they loved working with. Or really work that challenged them every single day. Money matters, doesn't it? I'm never going to tell you that it doesn't. It absolutely does. It supports every single one of our lifestyles, doesn't it? I mean, shoot, living in the DMV area where I'm from right now, I'm in Houston. Cost of living is completely different, but man, the DMV, it's expensive. But it's only part of the equation. Think about it for a second. If one company pays a little more, but another company gives you the opportunity to learn cloud technologies, maybe lead a team, earn certifications, or work on a mission that is going to make you more valuable 3 years from now, which opportunity is actually worth more? That's the question I want you asking. Because again, here's something I've learned. The professionals who build incredible careers don't just chase bigger salaries. They build bigger skill sets. I know it's tempting, but they build bigger skill sets. They build stronger relationships. They build a reputation for solving difficult problems. And over time, that money tends to follow. So, if I could leave you with one thought today, it's this. Know your worth. Not so that you can demand more. Not so that you can compare yourself to everyone else. Know your worth so that you can make better decisions. Because that's really what this whole episode is about. That's what it's been about, okay? That's what my intention is to communicate. Just replacing assumptions. Replacing assumptions with understanding. Replacing assumptions or replacing emotion with clarity. And replacing fear with confidence. That's how you own the conversation. So before we wrap up, I just want to leave you with one final thought. Your career is probably one of the biggest investments that you'll ever make. I would encourage you to treat it like one. Take time to understand the market, invest in your skills, build those relationships. Do not wait until you're unhappy to figure out what you're worth. Do the work now. So when the next opportunity comes along, you're making a decision from a position of confidence, not urgency. If this episode helped you, I'd really, really appreciate it if you'd share it with another Clear professional. I do this all from the heart. I hope that you can feel that. From giving as much information that I can, giving back to the community. These are the conversations that I think can genuinely change someone's career. And the more that we understand how this market works, the better decisions that we all make. And if we're not connected yet, and you're watching me here, especially on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe for future messages from future live streams that I do, okay? This is where I share all the recruiting insights, all the hiring trends that I see. And my intention is to share practical advice throughout the week. I know I'm probably bombarding your timeline. When you log on LinkedIn, you can't spit without hitting one of my posts. But I do it intentionally. I do it because there's something is going to connect with someone. And if I could just help one person this week, just one, that's all that matters to me. Until next time, keep investing in yourself, keep asking good questions, and remember, your clearance opens the door. Your skills create value, and your ability to communicate that value creates opportunity. I'll see you in the next episode.